Now, just to my left in this field is one of the single most famous ancient burials here in Britain, and after 200 years we've just learnt something absolutely staggering about it.
You could just imagine, it was shocked.
It dates from just under 4,000 years old. It sits in that field there behind me. It's only 30 centimetres high at this stage because it's been ploughed to death, but in 1801 William Cullington dug it up. Now, it turns out after 200 years or so we've just learnt that we've been misinterpreting that one specific burial now for 225 years, and therefore maybe a significant part of the Bronze Age as well.
Yeah, he realised straight away this was really something quite unusual.
How much can you really know about a person from that era? We don't know their name, their voices, the words they would have used, the language they would have spoke. All that's left is a handful of objects, a few fragments of bone, and the place they were laid to rest. And yet we can still write this wonderful story, this life story about this person buried there. We know so much about this person purely based on the objects that they were buried with. And here's the absolutely fascinating thing for me. How do we become so certain about one person when everything we knew about them rested on one single assumption?
What came back was just so surprising.
It turns out that this story isn't just about one extremely remarkable burial. This is a story about how prehistoric Britain is changing right before our very eyes. Okay, this is a bit I've been looking forward to the most, because the lovely people here at Wiltshire Museum invited me in to show me something rather special. Sitting inside are the objects from that extraordinary burial we were looking at, and hopefully the people who know this story better than anyone. You see, before we get to the discovery that's changed everything, I want to understand something much more basic. How did we become so certain about this person in the first place, and why has that recently changed? Let's go and find out.
The burial was discovered in 1803. It was excavated by a chap called William Cullington, and he found a skeleton laid out in the ground under a very low barrow. The skeleton was buried with all sorts of really quite unusual objects. Lots of stones, animal bones that strung around the neck as a necklace, and also around the bottom of a cloak. And he describes where everything was in the burial, which is really quite interesting.
Cullington was told by his doctor to get some exercise, so this was his chosen activity. He excavated a lot. So how did he know this was unusual?
By 1803 it excavated quite a lot of barrows, and normally you get a pot and a dagger and fairly standard set of things. And this was just weird, particularly the necklace of bones, the bones around what he said was a cloak. Just didn't fit with any of the other burials. Okay, so we're beginning to understand the significance of this person in their community. We've now even adopted them as a shaman. So it immediately made archaeologists, particularly Stuart Piggott in the 1930s, say there's something odd going on here. Being able to take a lump of stone and turning out gold-coloured dagger, the bronze or whatever, or being able to make gold objects that show people's status, that's something magical.
Wiltshire Museum, what a fascinating place that is. Really helpful people and a whole bunch to see and learn. One of the things that fascinates me the most is this shaman type character that would have existed in this community, in this society. Not just a metal worker, but so many more things, and that makes what happens next even more remarkable. Okay, well, I'm back in this Bronze Age landscape up here on this seemingly fairly high ridge. Now, this very much is a Bronze Age landscape, and if we look at some of the names on the map, have a look at this. We've got North and East Barrow Belt, we've got Great Barrow, we've got the ruins, we've got cold ovens, no idea what that means. The barrow itself in question was 10 metres across. At the point of excavation in 2000, well, it was only 30 centimetres high. For 2 centuries, archaeologists are building this remarkable picture of this person. Now, that wasn't just guesswork. This was done using the best means of archaeology we had at the time, using the objects they were found with. This picture, piece by piece, was emerging of who this person was. A skilled metal worker, a ritual specialist, and perhaps a shaman, and a man. Then in 2026, ancient DNA analysis produced an unexpected result.
What came back was just so surprising, because the assumption was that this was a male, and the result came back female.
So if one assumption can shape how we look at this grave for the last 200 years plus, but what else may we have looked at that we might have got wrong? Because here's the thing, this isn't the only ancient DNA story that is making us challenge some of these assumptions. There's kind of a lot of stories in the last few years which are changing how we view societies and how they lived, travellers, entire communities, entire eras of history. And then when you think about this grave, this particular site we're at now, this Bronze Age site, well, maybe the grave isn't the big story. This is just the beginning of the story, and it's quite exciting.
The reason it's been sort of highlighted now is the Crick Institute have an exhibition on in London looking at the contribution of ancient DNA to the understanding of archaeology, and this was the key burial that they wanted to focus.
Now, the more you look into this, the more you look at the DNA work being done on ancient societies and communities, the more you realise this is happening. Take, for example, the Iron Age, because for years we always assumed, certainly I did, that it was very much a male-led society. Yet a remarkable study co-authored by Miles Russell has turned that idea on its head. By analysing the DNA of dozens of people buried in Dorset, researchers discovered something quite extraordinary. The women stayed, and the men, well, they moved on. Generation after generation, communities were centred around the female lineage, with husbands joining their wives' families. So now when we read about the Romans writing about female leaders, the British female leaders, well, that kind of adds up now. We have the Boudica, the Cartimandua, and maybe more of them yet to read about, but it adds up and it makes sense. And of course, when we look at Miles Russell and his study from the Durotriges area, well, it happened there, of course, and that was in the late Iron Age. This all fits quite well for that era. Then you start seeing this pattern elsewhere, and we're not just talking about the whole female notion, we're just talking about other eras where long-held assumptions have been rapidly changing in the last 20 years. Take, for example, the famous Amesbury Archer, which for years was a simple rich burial discovered a few miles from Stonehenge. Now we know something much more personal. He wasn't local at all. Well, he spent a lot of his time in the Alpine region of mainland Europe before making his way here to this very landscape. That's wild, and now we have the ability to track one man's journey across an entire continent. And then the Boscombe Bowman, once it was just a simple collection of skeletons, again from this landscape. Today, isotopes suggest they shared a remarkably similar childhood with movements all from the west of Wales, and the DNA, of course, has shown that many of them were close relatives. But this is where things click, because the foundation of this is the science, the DNA analysis, the isotopic analysis, but it's helping us challenge these assumptions. We now can rewrite the story of this person that was found in this Bronze Age barrow, who is now female. We can rewrite our understanding of the Bronze Age. We can do that with the Iron Age. We can do that with people that travelled across entire continents to come to this landscape. Slowly, piece by piece, prehistoric Britain is becoming more and more clear to us. 2,000 years ago, someone was buried in that field just there. They were buried with extraordinary care, and for the last 220 years plus, we thought we understood exactly who that person was.
It's still very unusual, but there are other burials with objects that show that people are metal workers, but there's nothing on this scale. She has sort of almost 20 times more tools than anyone else in Britain buried with her. So that's what really marks her burial out.
It turns out we didn't know who that person was, not because archaeology got it wrong, we were dealing with what we knew at the time, but because archaeology and science never stop asking these questions. This grave hasn't changed, the gold embossed tools haven't changed, the landscape hasn't changed, only our understanding. That's happening right now all across Britain. Little by little, scientific analysis is improved, and it's helping us go beyond the monuments and the burial mounds and getting towards understanding the people that built them and were placed there.
You could just imagine, it was shock. The best reaction was from my colleague Lisa, because Tom was talking to us both, and he said, she's female. She went, yay! Victory for women. Because of course, although the assumption is always, men, tools, weapons and so on, women, pretty jewellery.
For generations, prehistory has felt distant. If you had a time machine, which era would you go back to? I'm often asked that question, but maybe now as time progresses, we're not going to need that time machine. The past is closer now than it ever has been before, and I love that so much.
Right, well, come and visit the museum, it's the obvious thing, but If you're slightly further afield, that can be a bit difficult. But we've got a fantastic YouTube channel. We do lots of events and conferences and all sorts, which you can find on the website. But also we put some of those talks up online. So if you're interested in Wiltshire's archaeology and some of those really wacky stories, come visit our YouTube channel as well.